All right, welcome back to another week from the bench. We are excited about having a guest we've all known for a long time, and it's really great to see her career develop and blossom, especially after the year that they had. But before we bring her on, let's just go around the horn and talk about what, hot takes or hot button items that you'd like to bring to the conversation today. Jesse, why don't you start?
Appreciate it, Brian. Always great to be on again this week, and excited for our guest coming up. Just a couple things, as we were talking kind of off air, I just really, and Brian, you brought up, some of the things that have come out on social media and people starting to maybe feel more comfortable in their skin, and yet we're still missing out on having some of those hard conversations and being real with the impact of COVID personally on each of our lives, or on a race conversation that's impacted us personally. And so I just really want to kind of, I'm looking forward to that conversation later with our guests, but just, having those conversations. That's why I appreciate our group. As we've always talked about, we're able to have those conversations with each other. But, really as coaches, our job is to mentor and show. And we've talked about before in the past, how our athletes are going to look to us and how we handle these situations. And so, just knowing that that's something that's important, and we need to continue having this dialogue and be willing to have those tough conversations. Sometimes it may be with our head coach, it may be with an administrator, as well as back down to our players. So, that's just something I think that's prevalent in my mind, and just want to, I know this group is thoughtful and mindful of that. So, just hopefully as we can all sort of drop that pond in the ocean and let that ripple out and help others by our own example. So, Gavin, I'll flip it over to you and just kind of get your thoughts and as we go forward.
Yeah, I think it's very important. It touches base on what we're going through, both as a society with some social injustice, as well as police brutality, racism that is going on. And then with this COVID-19, as campuses and sports start to get back to their playing seasons or to their practice and prep seasons, it's very important to what you said, Jesse, having those truthful, honest, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations, whether it has to do with social injustice or even just wearing a face mask, following the new procedures and guidelines set forth by your institution in order for you to get into a facility to have voluntary workouts. And we talked off air, like it means a little bit more for me having somebody in my household that is a little more at risk. But I take it very seriously, and it's something where, I might have to have that confrontation with somebody on our staff. It's like, hey, it has more to do not about yourself, but about the people you are surrounded by. So, it might have to be a little confrontational or uncomfortable, but I think I'm, at that point where I'm going to have to do that. And then I still think, the social injustice conversations, topics, and educating your team, those things continue. They have to continue until change is made. And that's not going to be a week thing, a month thing. It's going to be an ongoing conversation. And as these kids come back, Tony, and I'm going to toss it to you, but maybe you can speak a little bit about, are they okay coming back? We're putting all these procedures and policies in place, but at the same time, has somebody asked them, are they okay with taking that chance, or are there real fears there?
Yeah. I mean, I think, President Obama a couple of weeks ago, when he addressed the nation, he mentioned about the protests and everything that was happening, how inspired he was by the next generation in this country, and that the youth, the young people will make changes in this country. And I don't think I don't think anybody can disagree with that. And I don't think anyone can even possibly argue that fact based on what we've seen. But, when I look at it, I want to push it back a couple of years. I think the initial thought, I think through coaching, you hear this sometimes, it's like, when you talk about how can I, reach kids today? How do I coach? Kids are so different today, and blah, 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 blah. And there's not enough honest conversation with the players, and with the kids, because we don't think they can handle certain things, or older school coaches don't think kids can handle things. and for me personally, I was absolutely stunningly and shocked in a good way about how well the kids from Parkland handled their school, the shooting in their school, how quickly they rallied the country to their side, how quickly they were willing to stand up and talk about it, and talk about changes that need to be made. And they were not afraid to get on a town hall on CNN and, speak truth to power. They were not afraid. And so I know for me personally, that immediately showed me that, you know what, we can give these student athletes way more credit than we're giving them, because look, these kids are 16, 17, down to 13 in high school, and they're willing to stand up and step up and make a difference and talk about it. And now as you fast forward to where we are now, it's exactly the same thing. Youth of this country will make the changes for society that we need going forward. And so I think it's time that if we're not giving youth the respect they deserve, then we need to, especially as coaches, because these are people we should be mentoring and helping get better. So if it ever crosses a coach's mouth or mind or whatever, oh, they can't handle this, or, they're soft or whatnot. I think it's better that we just do what we've been talking about. Have a conversation and actually find out. Don't project the fact that they're that way. Maybe have a conversation and say, hey, how do you feel about this? What are your thoughts? Because as we can see, the youth of this country have no problem standing up and saying exactly how they feel to power, to the world, and they have no problem grouping together to say what they want to say. So I guess using all of that, it goes back to what we were talking about, Gav, is that right now you have professional sports leagues all bargaining whether or not they're going to come back and play. Obviously, the WNBA just settled on what they're going to do, 22 games at IMG. The NBA is getting closer to making their decision on what they're going to do. And I think you've got great, important voices like Kyrie stepping up and saying, look, I don't know if it makes sense for us to play right now until we get some of these other things ironed out nationally, which I applaud him for that. And then you have baseball, which they can't figure out a solution. But again, all of these organizations, they have a representative body, a players association that's bargaining with the people that own or run the league, own the teams, run the league. Our student athletes don't have that. And I know I've seen very little with this conversation about who is advocating for them. So if, let's say, I'm coaching the women's basketball team and we want our kids to come back and there's 12 kids on the team, are you coaches, or am I going to sit down and ask everyone, are you comfortable with coming back under these circumstances? There's a risk that you're going to get sick and spread it to somebody else or whatever. But I don't know if anybody's asking those questions. It's as if we're allowed to because we want to, we can, so everybody has to. And I just wonder if nationally the conversation is happening where they're asking their coaches are asking and administrators are asking the student athletes, not just expecting that they're going to come back, because again, they don't have a body that negotiates or that speaks for them. So anyway, I know that was kind of a long trajectory there, but the youth of today have a great voice, an intelligent voice, a powerful voice, and an extremely confident voice. It's just up to us as adults to listen.
Well, and I think that's the thing, right? When do we ever given the youth credit that they deserve? I mean, a father of three, I know my 3-year-old son, and Jesse, we've talked about this, probably knows more than what I'm giving him credit to in terms of how he's just running the house. But I think, and Gavin, you've talked interestingly, because like, who do you have in your household, right? Like, I'm married to an epidemiologist, someone who's part of public health. And when you talk about public health, we're really talking about 3 different fronts right now, right? And this is something that on the public health side, they're talking about HIV, AIDS, that whole epidemic, our current pandemic with coronavirus, and racism. And they're all it's so layered that, it's just interesting when you throw sports and education on top of that, how are we touching all those? But at the same time, how are we really being relational with all the peoples, whether it's in our circle, on our teams, you know, up, down, and coworkers, whatnot, you know. And so I think it's very, you know, we are in an unprecedented time, and I'm saying that only because of my history, right? Like 43 years, I've never really seen, I've seen moments where communities worldwide are coming together for a movement, for a change. And I think, you know, you talk about President Obama, you know, he's always given credit to youth. He's always given credit to that next generation, you know, grabbing the torch and then moving forward with it. And I think if we really listen, most of our athletes, most of the youth trust the social media platforms. That's where they get their news. That's where they get the juice to go do something. And if you really want to pay attention, I think we need to look at what they're putting out there, because that's their truest self, outside of the conversations that we can have with them. So we'll leave it at that for segment one. We are very, very excited for our guest, and we will be right back after this. All right, welcome back from the bench. We are very excited and pleased to welcome Coach Jaida Williams to our show. She's the head coach at Coastal Carolina. We are excited to kind of explore a lot of what's going on. But Jaida, why don't you open up with just talking to us about some of your career path, some of your choices along that path, and then, you know, what led you to Coastal?
Yeah. I was waiting for like the cheers, the to come on. But no, you know, I was very fortunate to get into coaching immediately after my eligibility was up. I played for Coach Paul Thomas. I always mess that up. I played for Coach Paul Thomas, who's now the head coach at St. Mary's University and up in the Bay Area in California. And so probably a month after we had finished winning Sweet 16, regional run, something, I don't know. We'd come back and one of our assistants was like, it was time for her to go and be a wife and a mother. And I still needed classes to finish my degree. And so Coach Thomas was like, I'd love to pay for you to finish your degree. But you're going to have to work for it in true Coach Thomas fashion. Anyone that knows him knows you have to work for everything you get from him. And so I joined his staff 30 days after I was a student athlete. And that's how my coaching career took off. And, you know, during the time of the path to become a head coach here at Coastal, I had the opportunity to work for some future Hall of Famers and some of the brightest, and I had no idea at the time, some of the brightest brains in women's basketball, starting with Lisa Bluter at the University of Iowa, who's been to the NCAA, incredible mother, wife, and coach. Had the opportunity to do that with her. And then Jose Fernandez was my second stop at the University of South Florida. And we all know Jose's he's awesome, you know. Got to coach under him for a couple years, and then the infamous Lindsay Gottlieb over on the West Coast came back to the West Coast. And, you know, Lindsay's now with the Cleveland Cavaliers as an assistant coach. And so I did not realize during my path of being an assistant that I would get to work for these amazing people. Hindsight, I'm super grateful for it. And then Jen Hoover at Wake Forest. And from Jen, I was able to land the opportunity to work at this amazing university at Coastal Carolina. So that's sort of my I guess tree timeline, however you want to call it. But I've been super blessed.
That's super awesome, Jaida. And I know, you know, we got to know each other kind of during your times at UC Santa Barbara, UCSB, and out on the recruiting trail, and probably. I was actually working for Paul at St. Mary's at that time. And so, you know, we're recruiting a lot of the same people. And so we would swap good Coach Thomas stories. You're 100% right. So I love that our business, you know, creates those paths where we cross.
Yeah.
And wow, I mean, I thank you for sharing that. I mean, those are some great, outstanding people in our sport for you to just, and like you said, you didn't even know it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Could you, after reflecting on some of those names, you get your first opportunity to be a head coach, and now you're 8 years in, and being a head coach in the college level, being a head coach at any level, really, it's like opening a restaurant, right? It's almost like to fail, you know? And the fact that you have gone now 8 seasons, what would you tell the Jaida that was going into that job in year 1 that you know now?
Oh my gosh. There's so much I would tell Jaida in year 1. You know, I don't think that anything prepares you for you can go to all the villas and all the conversations. You can do all that. And nothing prepares you for it like experience. You know, a couple things that I would tell myself, or anyone that's looking to take the opportunity is, number one, it's a blessing. It is a blessing. And have grace with yourself. It's going to take time. Believe in your vision, but absolutely no, you can't do it by yourself. So for all the micromanagers out there, this is an impossible one-person job. It is impossible for one person to do. You know, I think all the other cliche things that every other head coach says, hire smart. But of course, you're not going to know what that looks like until you know what it is you need. You know, I would say trust the process. Trust the process. And I mean that in several different ways. You know, if you know what the end goal should look like, you know, don't compromise any of that for short-term gain. For example, you know, if you're talking 4-year kids or plug in with the 1 year or et cetera, don't take any shortcuts. Just take your time and believe in the vision that you have, and know that, you know, people are genuinely just trying to help and help put your program in the best light possible. So just, you know, there's so many things in those first couple of years, you know, as you said, in a business, you know, most businesses crash and burn within the first, 3 years, 1, 2, 3 years. I was fortunate to work for an athletic director that allowed me the opportunity to grow. He could see the potential that was there. You know, we were able to together build an amazing program.
That's really good. And before, Tony, you go, just wanted to circle back. We have a lot of people that follow the show that are younger assistant coaches that are trying to be better for somebody like yourself. And as you've gone through this now 8 years, and you sort of mentioned, like, hey, knowing what I needed as a head coach, maybe was there an instance where you had somebody on the staff where, not in a negative way, but like it sort of revealed that to you, you know, like, oh, that's what I need, you know, and maybe how did that conversation or that instance happen where it was like, oh yeah, I need to think more deeply about what I need from my staff, and like maybe that person helped you. Was there a scenario or a general thing that had happened that you kind of had that aha moment?
You know, I think it just came from having great people on my staff. You know, I've had both. I've had really good staff members, and you know, the ones that stood out for me the most, that helped me understand what it was that I needed was, I don't know if you know Tom Gailey. He's over at Nebraska. He was probably the first of amazing assistant coaches that I've ever had. And, you know, Tom was in it for all the right reasons. You know, he was a diligent worker. He was very, very, very knowledgeable in what he brought to the table. And he was great at unifying our student athletes, our staff. He was just an amazing guy. And so after having Tom, I was like, gosh, I need someone like that consistently. And then I had Terry Prim. Terry was amazing for me. You know, he was the same. He was absolutely the same, you know, very loyal, very hardworking. And he was a phenomenal recruiter that started what began to be, you know, that helped move our program in the right direction. And then from him, I was lucky to get Letitia Luckett, who was a great recruiter, great, it all started, and then it started to say, I need this type of personality. This is what works well for me. And then Vanessa Taylor came in, and then I recruited my former player back. And, after I had the first good one, which I think was Tom, after I had the first good one, everyone else just kind of started from there. And then I kind of realized, okay, this is the type of worker that works best with my personality, that works well into the vision that I have. And I've been so fortunate. Now I've got like a rock star team, and I'm very, very fortunate to have been able to work through that from those first couple of years.
This fires me up, man. You're so fired. It's like you opened up the secret sauce of being self-aware to recognize what made you great. And you're just rolling out name after name of like people that are big time ballers as assistant coaches in our profession. So yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of young coaches need to know how they can connect with their head coach.
Yeah.
Tony, go ahead.
So going back to all that, so you kind of talked about, you figured out what you needed as an assistant coach. You know, what do you tell yourself to be patient and all that kind of stuff when you're, the first time head coach, but kind of trace your evolution, from year 1 to now going into year 8, kind of trace that evolution of you as a coach. Like, it might be as small as, what you thought was important from the beginning.
Oh yeah.
And maybe you realize that didn't really matter very much, but like that evolution to like what you thought mattered when you started to what matters, I guess now.
The first thing that pops into my mind, this was a conversation I had with legendary Cliff Ellis. He is our men's coach on our men's side. And I just remember when I first got here, everything was so important. Even in our player development, it was like your passes, thumbs down, you shoot, you got to have this follow through. You believe, you're taught to believe like, we're just going to be so detailed and just as fundamental, and which is great. I think that's all great. And then Cliff and I shared stories, the player of the year we had in the Sun Belt, her shot probably, it was interesting when she first got here. And we were just like, at some point, you just got to let players play and stop trying to jack up all of the stuff that they can do. And so I think the evolution of me as a coach is efficiency and getting the job done versus it has to look a certain way. The player of the year we had in the Sun Belt, you put her in a drill situation and you'd be like, oh my God. But you put her on the court and let her play, and it's a completely different scenario. And so that's when our recruiting went from, forget what it looks like. What's the efficiency like? Are they getting the job done? Is the ball going in the hole? Are they getting stops? All the other stuff is just, it's really not that deep, at least for me. Other people might feel differently, and that's okay. There's more than one way to skin a cat. But that's that's probably the top thing that sticks out in my mind, is because we just knew we were going to do everything this way, and then you just get a baller, and it kind of changes a little bit. I think
it always helps to get somebody who can get you
51. She got 51. The other thing I think that I guess sort of evolves is, everyone, the thing I did not know, I will tell you this, the thing I did not know was every program has stuff, right? And so, when you're coming up as an assistant, and this, I said I was going to save this for a book that I'll write one day, but you come up as an assistant and everyone's telling you the culture is extremely important. I do believe that, and we're not going to let anyone, and no one's going to absolutely, defy the odds of our standards and our rules and our program and X, Y, and Z. And that's true to an extent. I'm not going to lie. As I got to talk to people that were successful in our field, I won't mention their names, but just know that these are people that win championships across the board, and having conversations with them about some of the better athletes that are kind of tough. All of us have them. All of us have them. And it's about I know that everybody saw Phil Jackson's The Last Dance, or sorry, not Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan's The Last Dance. It's sort of about being a manager and learning how to coach within, that makes you feel comfortable enough, because these kids come from different backgrounds. They're completely different. And every single coach that's winning has had to deal with it. I know that there is an extreme in some cases where, coaches are like, getting, moving on to the next kid. But I've learned patience, especially in situations like that. And I don't know that any coach will ever say that out loud at a clinic or anything. But, when you have one-on-one conversations with people that have won, they've dealt with these same issues, and they've dealt with student athletes and have figured out ways to get them through and get them finished, while still producing at a high level. So that was something that blew my mind. Like when I would call and just say, how do you deal? They're like, oh, I had this kid in 2009. And I was just like, what I was told was everybody just gets rid of everyone who isn't a picture perfect student athlete. And that's not reality.
So within that, what you just said there, what specifically would be the how, for that? It's like what maybe are 2 or 3 things that are definites to deal with a situation such as that?
I think that you have to have open communication with not only whatever student athlete that is, their parents, or even your administration. Just have open dialogue about, this is where we are. I think that not giving up, Coach Rigby is someone who openly talks about this, so I'll use her name. Coach Rigby, again, you guys know she's a multi-champion on every level that she's coached at. And she always just says you have to have patience and prayer and conversation, and understand everyone's baseline is not the same. And so there has to be mentorship set up for them, whether it be you, whether it be someone outside of your program. But there's got to be mentorship and stuff set up, because at the end of the day, you got to understand what your passion and the kids' passion probably will come together when it comes to basketball. It's the other stuff. And so you have to you got to be willing to get your hands dirty a little bit and really mentor and teach, and realize not everyone comes from the same. You're trying to work with 18 years, 19 years of something that's probably very different than what you teach. And you have to be very patient with it. You have to, especially if your heart is in it to change lives. I think that you just have to be a little bit slower. And I think as I get up in age, I think my patience has grown tremendously, in the sense of it's not that fairy tale that I was sold when I was an assistant coach. Like, this is real life, and these are real lives that we're dealing with. And your patience has to be as if this is your own child.
I think that point you just made, in the sense of more coaches should be talking about that, because I think, you mentioned the culture, and I think when you teach the other side of that coin, right? Like, here's that tough kid. But when you teach this other body of players that, we're going to absorb them. We're going to have our hands out. We're going to have our arms out and just bring them in. And I think that's the true teaching, is knowing that your mentorship program is really coming from that team, welcoming them, right?
Correct.
To that locker room, and so that those relationships can grow. And I think it goes such a long way, because it is culture to the point of allowing others to know we're going to take that kid.
Correct.
We're going to be patient with that kid. And then that kid is like experiencing something that they probably haven't really had, Because,
yes. I'm going to agree with you. And I'll say that it's a true family. We always say that to our kids, and family isn't just the picture perfect thing that's on your mantle. Like, we all got that crazy cousin. We got that, but family sticks together regardless. And that's what a true family is. And, I think that helps with the chemistry too. I think that when you're a little slower to kind of trigger, in terms of, all right, you got the boot, you have the boot. People actually, I could see that with the chemistry of our team this year. Like if you treat it like family and are willing to work through the highs and lows, so are they. So are they. I mean, I was able to keep an incredible athlete for 5 years who, you know, we all know that her talent is ridiculous. You know, we were able, one student athlete transfer in the last 4 years. And it's not because every day is easy. It's because it does embodies everyone's highs and lows, and they know that. And so that's how the chemistry, I think, was able to form with our team, and why we were able to have such a magical year this year is because of that. I think that if you treat student athletes like they're indispensable, they're going to treat your program like it's indispensable. And when they have the opportunity to run, they will. And so I was very fortunate that that we didn't have that situation at Coastal.
Well, and I think that's a testament to you, right? And your vision, you talked about it, you know, what's that end vision look like, and kind of reverse engineer that. I'm going to pivot a little bit and go back to the staff. I'm always fascinated how, you know, staff is broken down with, you know, I'm talking about the higher level responsibilities, not so much in the weeds. So how do you give out responsibility to your staff members, but then what are your breakouts look like, you know, in terms of who's in charge of maybe X's and O's and recruit, all that stuff?
So this is one thing I think I do well. I find talent really well because my staff shoulders so much of what we do, like so much. Like there's no opportunity to be a weak link on our team because our staff does, and what I mean by team, I mean staff, because they do so much. And so I'm very, very fortunate to have that. And so a lot of it starts in, again, a lot of coaches will tell you they struggle with hiring people that they don't necessarily know. And that's true because you want to have a sort of a rapport. Dawn Staley said it on her last Zoom call. She said, you know, she's not going to hire anyone she doesn't know. Like, it's really difficult. First, you want to know that you have a rapport. I think for me, then it goes to, all right, has this person won at any of the levels that they have? They've seen what it looks like, because I will tell you, winners win. Winners find ways to win. And, you know, there's always, you know, those people that, like my college coach, I don't care where he's been on this face of this earth, he's won in every scenario that he's been in. And so I just think winners find a way to win. And so for me, it's have they won? Because then you understand the discipline, the work ethic, what we're looking for, you know, the pace that we need to move at. And then it's just like when I'm recruiting our student athlete, what is it that you do that is good? So Vanessa Taylor, my associate head coach, she is a phenomenal manager of people, up, down, left, right, side. She any situation that I am in, when it comes to admin, when it comes to academics or whatever it is, she is just, probably because she's older, she's had a lot more experience. She does that better than anyone I've ever met. And so her value is in that, because she does that better than, I promise you, anyone that I've ever met. And so that's why I need her there. And then I have AJ Jordan, who played for me, who was a phenomenal offensive player. But her mind for offense she is an incredible mind for offense. The way she watches things develop, the way that she sees things. And so I let her take that and run. And she also has an innate passion for player development. So she does that a lot for me. And so I give them, you know, those things. And then, you know, my other assistant coach, phenomenal defensive brain, you know, and then my Dobo, she don't want to be a coach, which is amazing. I love it. She wants to go into administration. So if anyone sees this in admin, I have the best Dobo ever. Please give her a call and an opportunity. But she just organizes, and she's been with me for 5 years, that she knows this thing. She knows everything backwards and forward, that I hardly ever have to manage her job. And so, you know, for me, I get to do the big picture stuff. They get to do some of the stuff that I like to do. But, you know, as a head coach, you have to let some of that stuff go. And I do a lot of the big picture stuff in our big meetings. All right, where are we on this? How are we on that? What do you need me to do, et cetera? But they're workhorses, man. And they just take stuff and they go. And I know for my young assistants who might have the opportunity to watch this, you know, not every coach is like that. Not every coach I worked for is like that, you know. But what I did take from the coaches that were more, you know, conservative and giving responsibility was, you know, you don't have to, I'm going to sit here and watch. You don't have to walk me through everything. You don't have to walk me through scheduling. I want to watch. I'm going to watch and see what you did and how you did it. And that was how I got my education. I'm going to go out. I'm going to figure things out myself, you know, because I know a lot. Well, I want to. Well, great. Sit back and just kind of see. All right, coach, what were you thinking when you scheduled this game here and this game here? You know, sit down and kind of, you know, just try to figure it out for yourself, you know, without stop, you know, kind of waiting and kind of saying, well, they won't, your success is dependent on you. And so figure it out, get where you need to get to. And if you are fortunate enough to work for someone who gives a lot of responsibility, like I give a ton of responsibility, you know, coach of the year, great. I'm glad I got that, but I tell everyone who would listen, I would never be that without the staff and the players that I had. So.
Well, it's fun. I mean, it's funny. And I know I can just see, I know Brian and Tony well enough to know that we knew when we came on, you were going to basically just be transparent and reveal why you have been winning basketball games. And you just adored there, Jaida. So it does not surprise us that you have had the success you've had. I want to drill down, go back to your associate head coach. You said helps in the areas of managing up and down. You know, we talked early on, we first started the show a few months ago about all the clinics and X's and O's and, you know, this and that. I don't know if there was a clinic on managing up and down for assistant coaches. You know, you just revealed a little bit of, hey, you can learn maybe when you have a head coach that maybe you're in a situation where they're more of a conservative, as you said, but you can learn by watching. How would you say or give advice to, say, an assistant of how they can, you know, manage the room, so to speak, or manage up or down so that they could come into a role in your staff in that way? You know, is there some tips that maybe you could share that you look for in people or how-tos for a younger assistant that because, you know, the obvious ones, right, are can you write a scouting report? Can you teach somebody how to, you know, square up and get a shot off? You know, those are the obvious ones. Skill development. But some of this other stuff is sort of, you know, it's almost vapor sometimes, but it's really special.
Yeah, well, I will say with the jump shots and the defense and the offense, let me tell you, anytime I have the opportunity to focus on just basketball stuff, I'm in heaven. That part of our job is literally very small. My assistants get to do way more of that than I get to do. And, you know, I hate that because that's the part we all sign up for, right? We do this to coach basketball, right? You know, honestly, that part is going to be difficult in terms of how does an assistant help manage up and down, because it requires a great deal of trust. I trust my associate as if, you know, I could be, you know, wherever, and I know that what the messages, whatever I need to get across, she's going to deliver it that way. And she was honestly probably the first person that I've ever had ever felt that way about, you know, and I think it was her experience. I told you she came in, she didn't have a great stint as a head coach or a head coach out of Division I, but prior to that, she had been a winner. And, you know, the thing I knew about Coach Vanessa is her name, Coach Vanessa, more than anything, she just wanted us to be successful. It wasn't about her. I can tell you, I've gotten a call about her every single year, somebody trying to recruit her and get her to move and do this and that. It was, I knew the genuineness in her heart. She just wanted us to be good. And there was nothing else came with that. It wasn't loaded. It wasn't, she wants to be a head coach again. It was, she's very, very happy, you know, co-piloting this thing with me. And that's where it began. And so then it could be, I could trust her with, how do we handle this situation? Because again, she's a winner. And she's seen things and she's done this twice as long as I have, and she's been able to just give me that good feedback. So it's really hard for me to give that to a young assistant, because my associate is she's older. She's been in the game a lot longer. She has earned her trust. But for myself, my admin, my student athletes, she's become like a staple for us. So, for a young person, I don't know. That's a really difficult question. I don't know that I can accurately answer that one. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I think you actually did, because what you with kind of combining something that you said earlier about, observing your head coach and some of those responsibilities. Maybe if I'm the young assistant, I should be observing Vanessa,
right.
And watch how she does that. So if I'm a young assistant, have that awareness, like I might not have the experience to do what Coach Vanessa's doing for you,
right.
but I want to be in those shoes at some point. So I think you actually did answer it without even kind of knowing, being able to hear you talk about it. It's that ability to observe and learn.
Yes.
And that's a really, like you just said, an important trait that we don't all talk about a lot. So.
Right.
Correct. Thank you. You framed it perfectly. So thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, so clearly you have that ability to communicate with Coach Vanessa, and just so you guys can have that communication back and forth about this topic, that topic, the other thing. I guess the question, and I talked about it a little bit at the beginning, is that you have a lot of teams and coaches and on the pro level trying to get back to playing, right? We all want to get back to playing, and
right.
Players do. I'm coaching a club program right now. We're trying to do the same thing. So, there's all these things going on, and you hear about student athletes coming back to campus to work out and do all these things. And obviously the big football programs you're hearing about, half a dozen people are positive with COVID here and there. So I guess ultimately my question is, in the pro game, you've got a lot of, you have organizations that have players associations, right, that do negotiating and all that. So as a general question, I don't know how many coaches are out there saying, yeah, I know we're allowed to come back, but, and how important communication is. Are you communicating with your kids about how do they feel about maybe coming back and working out or playing? I don't know if you've had those conversations, but
they won't let me not have those conversations.
Okay, so that's good.
I mean, all of us know summertime, they get those nice checks to come back in the summer. We only get 5 hours to work out with them. They're at the beach. My kids have been ready to come back since March. What are we doing, Coach? What are we doing? They're ready to come back, and we all know the ability to have summer access is a blessing. And we want it as bad as our student athletes want it. But we're in something that whoever has to study history in years from now has to study 2020. Man, this is going to be a hefty chapter. I'm telling you. This is some weird stuff right here. This is just, I don't even know how to put it. Our football team just started last Monday. With phase 1. So they are the initiators for Coastal Carolina. And so before anyone else, our football team has started. The first 40, I believe, that are on campus are just now starting to go. And so they're a weekend. And so, I'm sure when we have our next head coaches meeting, we'll find out how that is going with them. And, so far so good. And it all depends on how they do. It's going to depend on how the rest of our university and the rest of our athletic department moves. It's so hard. Our kids are ready to be back. They're ready to be in the normal group. They just want to feel normal again. And I understand everybody does, but gosh, I'm just as lost as everybody else about what's going on out there and when we will be able to return to play. It's been encouraging though. I saw the WNBA is going to start up in August, correct? Or is it July? I can't remember.
Late July, yeah.
So
22 games at IMG, so it's not going to be a huge season, but they are, trying to isolate. Yeah.
Yeah, so they have that. They have, people talking about training camps starting again. We're at least having conversation, and that's encouraging because it wasn't always like that. I want our student athletes to be here so that we can prep. I'm praying that we get a full regular season this year. But I also want our kids to be healthy, to be able to do that. We're accustomed to having our summer session and getting into the year and the workouts, but I don't know. I wish I had a better answer. I don't think.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Okay. What if now, you know, and I don't know if this is happening, and obviously I'm not with a college program, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know, what if a kid calls you and says, Coach, you know, I know we have workouts and all this stuff, but I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe.
And I think they have that right. I think they 100% have that right.
And I guess the second part of this, it sounds like your kids would have no problem making that call.
I don't know. You've coached college kids. They're trying to get back to college. They're trying to get out of their mom and dad's house, and they're trying to get back to college. If one or two or whoever decided that they wanted to be home, I'm going to respect that too. Like, I get it. Like, this is crazy. This is a crazy time. And so, but I'm certain if I were to put that group chat in, those kids would be on the next thing smoking.
Well, if I was going there where you're at, I might want to go too, especially now. So.
Exactly.
You know, you talked about 2020 and how that would be a hefty chapter to look back on. So this is kind of a two-parter. First, you know, how are you doing personally with, you know, Black Lives Matters and just, you know, the movement, but also, you know, being a Black head coach in our business? How are you doing? And then how has it been with your team, you know, with these discussions and, you know, the advocacy that they want to do and just the environment that you're creating for them so that they are, one, comfortable in their own skin, but two, really taking it all in so that they can maybe be catalysts for change?
You know, on full transparency, this has been very difficult. In full transparency, it is a very difficult situation to navigate, and it's a difficult situation to kind of navigate with my student athletes, because I want to lead them in the right way. You know, part of me is like, okay, you know, do we talk about all of the injustices, or do you lead them in a way that is like, okay, let's just make sure we are taking care of ourselves and our business? And, you know, this is a very, 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 very sensitive subject, not only being an African-American head coach, the first and only at my university, you know, to like, it's really tough. You know, you want to make sure that I have a predominantly African-American team. And I want to make sure that I am leading them in the way that they should be led. You know, for them right now, a lot of my student athletes are just angry. And I want to make sure that we productively channel that into ways that we can make a change. You know, when we talk, you know, they're very passionate about this subject, about race, about things, you know, and you know, when they are telling me their passions, I just want to make sure that they know that they're heard and that they're supported in any way they feel like they need to be supported. You know, it's tough. It's a really tough balance because, you know, part of it is, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, I don't want my student athletes to hate any one group of anyone. We've lived that long enough. I don't think that any group of any person is to be hated. But let's keep the message on equality and continuing as women and as Black women, you know, wanting to be seen, treated, and heard as an equal counterpart. And so I just kind of am trying to move the conversation sort of to that. And what do we need to do to make sure that they understand that their life matters just as much as our men's basketball team or as much as anyone else around campus. And I'm not going to lie, it's an uncomfortable and it's a weird situation. But I think that's good. I think that's really good. And I'm just grateful that the conversation is being had. And I'm praying that there are tangible things, action items that come out of this entire situation that can change. And, one of the things I saw on social media, it's interesting, they were saying a lot of people are changing, a lot of companies are changing their policies or things towards the African-American community as if we just arrived. That's tough, We've been working these jobs and doing these things. And so I just want it to be better for my student athletes. I don't think any of them should ever be the first Black woman to do anything. First Black, definitely not. And first Black woman, I just don't think, I want them to be a part of where it's the norm. Let's pull more diverse seats at the table that makes decisions. I think that's what's important. I love anyone that are making the changes. But I think, at the higher levels, let's continue to have diverse settings so that we can have diverse conversations, so that we can understand several different platforms. That's ultimately what my goal is, and I'm hoping to try to reach. And anytime I'm asked what it is, I think is just, let's figure out how we can get diversity in all levels. Men, women, Black, white, Mexican, Asian, I don't care. I think diversity, I think representation is very important in this world.
So well said there. And I think, we've heard about it through different athletes at the pro level. And I think what we have as coaches in our locker rooms is such a powerful thing because, you mentioned the word family and you've created that through your leadership. It's your leadership that then creates that culture, and that's where it starts. And you've allowed your students to be heard, as you just mentioned. And I think what I heard you also say that I think was such an important piece that we all can take, not only just for our coaching, but for our daily lives, is we can't continue the hate of a group, but we can remove the individual that sounds and acts and talks like that from our lives. You have that choice. Take that individual and get out of here. But I'm not going to paint that group with that picture, because I need that group to learn and have a conversation and have dialogue. And so we can take that hate and through conversation, maybe we got to remove the one, but that entire, let's move forward in conversation so that we can continue this process. So I love how you frame that. Can you talk more about maybe, we're in the heat of it still. And as you said, we look back at 2020 and man, it's going to have its own, if we, we're going to date ourselves here, right? But that would have that own encyclopedia volume, right? Remember we went to the library and all the encyclopedias were there. 2020 would have its own book, right?
Yes.
Talk about maybe how, we talked about in the opening of the show, sometimes just with whether it's interaction with somebody and are we wearing a mask or for COVID reasons or not? Are we talking about race issues or not? And those difficult conversations. And if we look back pre-2020 and everything we've gone through, how or have you started to think about some of maybe the difficult conversations that you have to have with your student athlete or with your athletic director or with your assistant coach? And maybe these intense things, teaching our athletes, teaching our younger coaches that these are the same skills that we have to use. Have you begun thinking about any of those kind of things in relation to maybe the intensity of what we've been going through?
Yeah, I think that it's so strange. It took something like a pandemic for everybody to be paused for a second. Because think about it, right now in the month of June, half of the athletic culture would have been wrapped up in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. People would have been traveling the world. Like, there would have been no way to address the root of what is going on in America except for a pandemic. And so I think through the conversations with my student athletes, it is an opportunity to teach. Like, that's been my biggest thing. We don't hate anyone. You know, we don't. We've lived that. We don't want that anymore. We want to learn inclusion. You know, when they, you know, the thing my student athletes, some of them have expressed, I can't say all of them, some of them have expressed is, you know, the anger towards people that have not spoken out on their behalf or spoken out for them. And so one of the things that I tell them all the time is just don't be upset. Have the conversation, because honestly, a lot of the conversations that I've had, it wasn't because people didn't care. Number one, they just didn't know what to say. Or the second part is they just don't fully understand, you know? Someone completely was just like, you know, when I hear Black Lives Matter, I'm like, well, yeah, duh. And so they don't, you know, and they didn't say that from a negative place. It was actually from a good place, because then she went on to say, you know, then I got to see it from other scopes of, wow, I had no idea that this was what you were living, walking, and talking. And so I tell our student athletes these stories so that they can understand it's not that, you know, people don't care about you or don't want to support you. It's just, if that hasn't been your reality, it's really hard to completely understand or even what to say. And so I've encouraged them to try to have those conversations, because I think, you know, censorship, nothing comes from censorship. Everything comes from conversation. Change happens with conversation. Change doesn't happen if you're just quiet about it. So I'm hoping those messages get through.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's heightening everyone's emotional intelligence. You know, I mean, with our program at Point Loma, that's been our summer project, and Lisa, our head coach, has really made it a point where in our meetings they're doing their own process with that for them, and kids have been sharing about some of their story, and I think a lot of it is the ability to pause and be introspective and think intelligently about your different emotions that you're going through, with the intensity of a pandemic, Black Lives Matter, but then now into my own heart. And that's what our team has started to do, is it, even aside from those issues, started to reveal some of the things that have made them think the way they do and act the way they act on the court. It's been unbelievably powerful. And our team now is just like, it makes up like now I know when she's upset, and that happened on that, you know. So just like you said, that heightened emotional intelligence, that because we aren't thinking about the NBA playoffs, or we're not thinking about summer vacation or what have you, has really forced us. And maybe we're going to look back, for me as an eternal optimist, it's like we're going to look back at that encyclopedia volume of 2020, and we really did move the needle on our ability to have a higher level of emotional intelligence. And I love your energy on that too. Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what we're going through now is today's modern day civil rights movement almost. You know, there were great things that came from the civil rights, but that was just one layer. And I'm so proud of the youth for pushing that even further for us and actually bringing about change, because there are changes that are happening. I'm proud of our university for the changes that they've been able to make, you know, and it's just, I just want them to keep pushing till we're all free, until we're all equal, until we can all, you know, represent, you know, at the higher levels.
And we need to shout that from the mountaintop too, because you just talked about all the changes. I mean, Tony brought it up in our off the air. Just, you know, sometimes we don't hear those stories because you know, it's not dramatic, right? And so I love hearing that, you know, in that frame. So thank you, Tony. Go ahead. So
you know, it sounds and you definitely have a great communication level with your team.
Yeah,
you know, you're able to talk about a lot of things, and it sounds like it's been positive, obviously, for everybody. A couple of things that we talked about early on was that there's, you know, once you get out of your team setting, sometimes there's some other issues. You know, there's generational issues. So you're not sure necessarily what to say to someone because you don't want to be disrespectful to the generation or the family situation, or you're just afraid of that confrontation, you know, or you're just like, you don't want to be mean. So you think you're going to be mean if you see something. So all those things are out there. So I guess using those kind of ideas or those thoughts of why people maybe don't have the conversation, being one of the only Black members of your coaching staff as a university, how has that affected maybe how your administration has dealt with this topic throughout your department? with you, I mean, I don't want to mischaracterize it or just what does that look like? Those conversations that you've had.
Our AD, he asked everyone, what
Jimmy,
they're
right?
Huh?
That's Jimmy?
No, my that.
Okay, gotcha.
And so he asked all of us, what our ideas were that we can do. And for me, I was like, I've been waiting for this question.
Okay, I got a whole book full of them.
I'm so glad you asked, because, everything you want to make sure that you always, as a Black woman, and, sorry, you guys probably can't identify with this. You're always cautious to not come off as the angry Black woman, the stereotype that's out there. And so, as time has progressed and I've been able to represent my university, there's been things that I've had in our mind. And so when my boss asked, I was like, oh my God, yes, I'm so glad this is presented the time. And I think because he's a very open, I think you have to be when you're coaching so many or, you're in charge of so many young people. And so, I don't know what the rest of my colleagues said, but I know that, we gave him some stuff and he came back maybe a week later and was like, this is what we're working on and this is what we're trying to do. And I was just very glad and very grateful that, sometimes you just want to know that, just like my student athletes, you just want to know that you've been heard. And so I know that he's going to do whatever he can do to ensure the comfort of our student athletes. And so, if somebody gives me a shot, I'm going to take it. You go back to my playing days. I ain't never met a shot I ain't like. So he gave me a shot. I took it, and he's going to try to implement, the things that, some of the things that we gave, and I think kudos to the NCAA, is marking election day. That's probably the biggest thing, is because we can have all the walks and talks, and if you don't get to the polls, it doesn't matter, and so I'm really, really proud of that. And my AD was on board for, he was thinking about doing that before the NCAA signed off on it, or talked about it. So I just think educating our youth, because that is where the power is. The sun is almost down on our time. We still got a couple more, years.
We'll take it easy there.
Yeah, we still got a lot more years in us. But, in terms of educating and where the real movement is, it's these young people, man. It's them. And I'm really glad that our university heard that and are taking action to make sure we follow up on that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And it's awesome that, we're stepping out now and say, look, we're going to, election day is an off day. And there's tons of coaches out there. It's on the web. There's on Twitter. There's obviously a handle for engaging student athletes and getting them to vote.
I followed that. Someone, they followed me and I followed them.
Yes,
back.
absolutely. And all those things are great, and we're going to get at student athletes, but the next step, there's always a next step, right? And what's the next step is what you said, educating. So it's not just the federal elections we're talking about, is making sure that our student athletes are educated on the candidates in their local elections, where they're voting in their hometowns.
Well, those are the laws that we're not complaining about. The ones that we have the most issue with is, you got to understand, you got to vote for things such as, who are your judges, who are your who are your lawmakers, who's your chief of police, you have to know all of these things. That's why something can happen in Florida and be very different in Texas, because not all of these laws are the same. And you need that education as to what they are in our particular state and what we're voting on.
Well, I appreciate you sharing everything that you did. I know, from the show, we've all known each other for so long, and it's so good to see such a success story, just like yourself, just in the sense of just being able to build your own program, being able to have the backing of your administration to do that, to trust your vision, putting together a package in terms of a staff that can create the environment that's special for those players. Before we go, any last words, anything that you want younger coaches to know or counterparts to know in terms of just anything, and you can go in any different direction, but anything that you'd like to leave us with?
The first thing is, if you have a dream, I hold tight to it. Hold tight and work as hard as you can towards it. There is no one formula. The way that Coach Jaida built Coastal is not going to be the same way Brian builds whatever, or whoever wants to build whatever, just make sure that your intention, I think everything in life comes down to intention, honestly, and just keep your intentions as pure as you possibly can, and do things from the heart, and do things because you know that they're right with who you are, and continue to push. I think one of the things that my coach told me, he was just like, just work as hard as you can. That's work as hard as you can, and somehow it always works out. It doesn't mean it has to be exactly what you believe or what you thought it was going to work out to be, but just work as hard as you can, and somehow everything works out. And for me, everything comes down to attention. So all my young people, keep going, keep going. I have watched, our entire generation, people's dreams come true, defy the odds, be the first, second or third, just be the best that you can possibly be. And I think the other thing that I realized, or not just realized, I found out as becoming a head coach, is we're all trying to do the same thing. So have not only grace for yourself, but other people. Leave the gossip, leave all that stuff behind. None of that matters. When you finally get your opportunity, you'll realize everyone's fighting for the same thing, and just kind of just have grace for people, have grace for yourself. And eventually you'll get to where you want to go. That's all for young people. And coworkers, just keep doing your thing, man. This is a hard, awesome, stressful, rewarding, amazing, why do we do this job? But we got the greatest job in the world. And, just keep your why close to your heart, and you'll get over the hard days. And trust me, when the good days come, you'll celebrate your neighbor's good days, especially if you're not in that season. Just know everything is cyclical. Everything is cyclical. So we were up. I pray we stay up and further for a long time, but everything is cyclical, man. So just do your best where you are, and hopefully, good things will happen. So that's all I got, y'all. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to my boring stories. I hope somebody clicks on and listens to the podcast.
Thank you for coming on, Jaida. Thank you.
No, thank you. You're a beautiful person. You are an amazing coach. Keep doing what you're doing, and there's going to be years and years of success. But we appreciate you being on. We will be right back.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back with us From the Bench. We want to thank Jaida Williams for being with us today. She was a fantastic guest. A lot of great information there. I think the big takeaways we have from today, and kind of something that we've been talking about from the beginning, is communicating, not being afraid to have the hard conversations, not being afraid to set up an environment where you can have honest conversations with your whole team, with your administrative staff, with your coaching staff, with everyone. And the more, honest communication we can have from top to bottom, and points of view we can get out there, I think, that's where your changes come in. And almost always they're positive, because you're starting to build a culture of acceptance and tolerance and, understanding of human beings outside just the sense of, we're all trying to win a basketball game. So, those pieces are, don't ever forget that your student athletes are human beings first, and, being able to communicate and share feelings and thoughts and concerns are just a huge part of us being humans together.
Yeah, I think it was interesting, on that same topic in terms of relationships and communication, of what her evolution was as a coach. right? The types of staff that she was wanting to build, and just the observation and the self-awareness that she was able to touch on what do I need, right, as a head coach, but also now that I found what the great look is for me, to continue getting that same type of an assistant. And I think it's awesome that, to hear that her evolution of just that mindset is kind of what we all do, right? Like, I think we can't be so stubborn or stuck that we don't see a lighter path, to go down, and look at what it's created, a championship level year, and probably more to come. I mean, that's how good she is.
So true. And I think that's, I love that she framed it that way and telling her story. And Brian, you say it all the time, that's what we're doing here with the show, is allowing that story to sort of provide a blueprint for moving forward. And she really did just kind of open up why the 8 years of being a head coach and being a successful one, how she's done that, and that self-awareness, as you mentioned. And I also thought she intertwined something that we opened the show with, the power of our young people and empowering them, giving them a voice, making sure that they're heard, and then how to use that energy and power for profit, and I think she really did a nice job of framing that. So it's been another great week from the bench, and appreciate all of you joining us every week. We look forward to next week's show. And again, that's it from the bench.